In 1792, America made a promise. A sacred contract forged in silver and gold. It was a promise of honest money, real value, and moral integrity. Most people think of money as just paper or numbers on a screen, a tool for buying things. A simple fact of life. But what if it's not that simple? What if the very nature of your money has been fundamentally changed, slowly, silently, over centuries? What if the system that was designed to protect your wealth is now engineered to drain it? If you've ever felt like you're working harder but falling further behind, or watched the price of everything around you climb while your savings seem to shrink, you are not imagining it. What's happening to your wallet isn't an accident. It's the final act in a long story. A story that began with a promise of honest money and ends with a system built on control, debt, and illusion. Before we unravel this, let me know in the comments, what's the most expensive thing you remember buying as a kid, and what does it cost today? I'm always fascinated by how these numbers tell a story of their own. And if you believe that understanding money is the key to freedom, make sure you subscribe, because today's story will forever change how you see the dollars in your pocket and the digits in your bank account. Now, let's go back to 1792. The dust of the revolution had barely settled. The founders, wary of the tyranny of kings and the chaos of worthless colonial paper, sought to build a nation on a foundation of unshakable principles. This led to the Coinage Act of 1792. It wasn't just a law. It was a moral declaration. It created the United States Mint and defined the dollar as a specific weight of silver. Gold coins were also minted, with their value pegged to silver. This was honest money. Not a promise, not a political tool, but a tangible asset. Your dollar was a piece of real metal with intrinsic value. The founders understood that for a republic to thrive, its citizens needed to trust their money completely. This trust was so sacred that the penalty for debasing coins, shaving off a bit of the metal, and profiting from the fraud was death. Think about that. They equated the corruption of money with the highest of all crimes. It was a bulwark against the invisible theft that governments throughout history had used to fleece their own people. For decades, this bimetallic system of gold and silver provided a stable anchor for the young nation's economy. The government set a fixed exchange ratio between the two metals, initially 15 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. Citizens could freely exchange one for the other, creating a self-regulating balance. This system wasn't perfect, but its core principle was sound. Money was property, not policy. It belonged to the people, not the powerful. However, this delicate balance was difficult to maintain. As global discoveries of gold and silver shifted their market prices, the government's fixed ratio began to create distortions. This gave rise to a timeless economic law. Bad money drives out good. When the official ratio undervalued gold, people would hoard the gold coins and spend the relatively overvalued silver. When the ratio flipped, silver would disappear from circulation. The honest, stable system began to show its first cracks. Over the next century, the foundation of American money began to erode, not in a single cataclysm, but through a series of calculated shifts. The bimetallic standard faltered, and the nation slowly drifted toward a gold-only standard. With each step, the direct link between the everyday dollar and a physical store of value grew weaker. Power began to consolidate. The ability to define and control money started to shift away from the constitutional mandate and into the hands of politicians and well-connected bankers. The citizen was slowly being cut out of the equation. The first great rupture came with the Civil War. To fund the immense cost of the conflict, President Lincoln's government issued greenbacks. These were paper notes, not redeemable for gold or silver on demand. They were the nation's first major experiment with fiat currency, money backed only by government decree. While intended as a temporary measure, the greenback broke the psychological link to metallic money. It proved that a government could, when it deemed it necessary, simply print wealth into existence. The genie was out of the bottle. This set the stage for the most significant transformation of all, the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, sold to the public as a way to prevent financial panics and stabilize the banking system. It was, in reality, a momentous transfer of power. A private consortium of powerful banks was given a legal monopoly over the creation of America's money. Control was centralized. Money was no longer a matter of principle, defined by law and backed by metal. It became a tool of policy, managed by a small, unelected committee whose decisions would shape the fate of millions. The next blow was swift and shocking. In 1933, at the depths of the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, in a move that would have been unthinkable to the founders. The U.S. government outlawed the private ownership of gold. American citizens were forced to turn in their gold coins and certificates to the Federal Reserve in exchange for paper dollars. The government then immediately redefined the dollar, devaluing it by nearly 40% overnight. It was a mass confiscation of wealth executed with the stroke of a pen. The dollar was no longer a claim on gold. It was whatever the government said it was. The final tether was cut on August 15, 1971. Facing economic pressures and a run on U.S. gold reserves by other nations, President Richard Nixon appeared on television and announced he was temporarily suspending the dollar's convertibility to gold. That temporary suspension is now over 50 years old. In that moment, the U.S. dollar, and by extension, the entire global financial system, became a pure fiat currency. It was backed by nothing but faith in the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve's ability to manage it. The last vestige of the 1792 promise was gone. Since that day, the dollar has lost over 95% of its purchasing power. The consequences of this shift from honest money to controlled money have been profound and devastating. The constant expansion of the money supply, what we call inflation, is not a natural economic phenomenon. It is a policy. It is a silent and insidious tax on every person who saves. It systematically transfers wealth from the hands of the ordinary citizen to the government, and to those closest to the money printer. Your savings become a melting ice cube, and you are forced to become a speculator in the stock market just to keep your head above water. This is the modern-day equivalent of coin shaving. Economists call it the Cantillon effect. When new money is created, it doesn't spread through the economy evenly. The first recipients, governments, large banks, and corporations, get to spend it at its current value before prices have had a chance to rise. By the time that new money trickles down to the average person in the form of wages, prices have already been bid up. Wealth flows upward from the last spenders to the first spenders. The system is rigged. Now, we stand on the precipice of another great transformation. Money is no longer paper, it is data. It exists as digital entries on a ledger, entries that can be created, moved, and deleted with a keystroke. Governments around the world are now racing to develop central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. They sell this as progress, a more efficient, secure, and modern financial system. But the reality is far more chilling. A CBDC would represent the ultimate form of control. It could turn money from a tool of property into a tool of permission. Your ability to transact could be switched on or off. Your spending could be monitored, restricted, or even programmed with expiration dates to force you to consume. It is the final step in the long journey away from the freedom envisioned in 1792. It is a world where money is no longer yours. The Coinage Act of 1792 was more than an economic blueprint. It was a moral contract. It was a promise to protect the citizen from the silent, invisible theft that has toppled empires throughout history. That contract has been broken. The honest money of the founders has been replaced by the controlled money of the powerful. History shows us that no society has ever survived the collapse of trust in its money. When faith in the currency disappears, faith in institutions and in each other disappears with it. The fight for the future is a fight for the soul of money itself. Because true freedom is impossible without honest, independent money that the powerful cannot debase, confiscate, or control. The choice between money as property and money as permission is a choice between liberty and servitude. The story isn't over, and the next chapter will be written by the choices we make today. If you found this journey through history eye-opening, share it with someone who needs to see it. Our mission here is to uncover the truths that shape our world, and your support makes that possible. Thanks for watching.